Let me just recap what we discussed, and then we will look at the code. So we were looking at a simple to-do list, which is built using OOPs of JavaScript, a very basic example, but these are the foundations for us to understand both JavaScript, React.js, and even Express.js as well. The same approach, which can be applied across various different JavaScript frameworks, be it Angular, React, or any new framework that is coming in. The only difference would be the fancy syntax that you see, but rest all would remain the same. Okay. So looking at this application, so let me just run it for you. I think there are a few new participants that are joining today. So let me run it for you first. A very simple to-do list, which basically allows you to do basic CRUD operations within the local system itself. No server or anything, just a simple CRUD. So this is my folder structure in which I have a view file, which is your HTML scripts. I have a simple script which is written in JavaScript, and I have some style component or a style file which is written in basic CSS. Okay, nothing complex, pretty straightforward. So what we'll try to understand now is let me just open this. Yeah. So if you observe the information that I added before, I mean, in our last class, is still persisting. So the reason is because this information was stored in local storage of my browser, and I didn't forcefully deleted it, or neither I closed my browser. So we'll come to that local storage thing again. So I'm able to add a task, search a task. I'm able to, do some basic filtering, which are completed, which are not completed, the list of everything. Okay. So we were looking at a basic flow key, how whenever you input some information, let's say whenever I want to add a new task, let's say by class, for example. So there are two things that is happening. One is I'm able to enter the information in the text box, which is a input handler, or you can say a simple input element. And based on some action or an event that I'm performing on a button, I'm able to add a new item into my list. Okay, so this is the flow of what exactly is happening. We'll look at the flow first, wherein we will see. Yeah, first I'm having one basic element on which we are basically performing a action, or you can call it as an event. The term action is very important because we are going to talk about this a lot in React.js. So I'm performing an event or an action on an element, which is obviously in my HTML, and you're able to see some output, which is nothing but data creation. So you're basically creating a task, right? So data is being created. So as we are talking about client-side JavaScript, we are yet to go to the server-side JavaScript. Okay, the reason why I'm specifically mentioning client-side JavaScript is because the JavaScript that we are currently using is just used to tweak the cosmetics or the skeleton that you see on the browser. That's it. So essentially, what we do is we will bind events. Even this term is important, binding event. So what is meant by binding? is, so to a particular HTML element, you tend to associate a task. So for example, if you look at this code, forget about all these functions, just try to understand the sequence. As we are not going to write the code from the scratch. As I told you, we are going to work in a way where you're given a you're given some 10,000 lines of code and you're going to try to debug it, understand the code. So our approach will be in that manner. Okay. So this would be a little difficult, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. Okay. Because I'm going to take, a few parts in the middle of the code. So here first, let's go line by line. I have created, okay, this is filtering function, sorry. The function that we are talking about is, where is this? Button. Add prompt form for adding tasks. Okay, as I told you, always use camel case and make the function name as comprehensive as possible. Okay, so I have created two buttons, sorry, two elements. One is your input element, an input text box, and a button. Okay, so the thing is, the function that is used to create elements is document dot create element. Okay, similar functionality or similar functions you find in React.js also, wherein you create an entire component altogether or an entire section. Let us say, see, for example, I'll give you a little lessons here. For example, I'm looking at a page where I have a very simple page, and this page is just focused on creating a to-do list. That's it. This page doesn't talk about much. But if you see any scalable web application or some application which is very bigger, having more features, you will end up seeing multiple things on a single page, and you can basically operate any section of the page simultaneously, right? For example, let me open some random page here. Let's take Zomato, for example. So whenever I open this page or, just come here, I have different functionalities that I can access at a single point of time, right? So I can choose between delivery, dining out. So I have a selection for the categories of the restaurants, and then if I go down, I have a component which just talks about a simple restaurant, and it got repeated, right? So if you observe, most of the times whenever you tend to build web applications, you use something called reusability. You use a concept or a practice called reusability. So what does this mean is, by nature, if you take any application, you don't write HTML or JavaScript for each and every section or each and every item that you see on your web page, right? So what we do is we create some HTML and you tend to reuse it at various different places. Okay, the reason why I'm telling you this is, as you can see, this application is having multiple components and you can access any component or any HTML at any point of time. It works. Okay, but here it is just specific to your page. That's it. But if you come here, you're creating an element in your document. Likewise, let's say you're talking about an application which is being used by some millions of users, and there is a very huge functionality that you're going to talk about. So you don't tend to create element at every point of time. See, for example, just imagine this is a function, okay? And every time this function gets called, don't you think this button would be created those many times? It is a repetitive process, isn't it? So if you are doing these kind of activities, or if you are continuously rendering your HTML or showing your HTML, because ultimately JavaScript renders your HTML. it throws this HTML skeleton onto your web page or your browser software. So if you tend to create these HTML elements on a repetitive basis, your browsers are not in a position to handle those many computations. Okay, so this is one of the biggest problem that your UI frameworks are going to address. Okay, one is the size of the application, wherein you'll have a lot of HTML renders happen. So what we essentially do is, let us say you're talking about adding a task here. Okay, for example, I want to scale this application, the same page that you're seeing. I asked you to create a task to-do list. In addition to that, you can add subtasks to your to-do list. For example, you're currently adding a task, you can add subtasks, and each and every subtask will have a description again. You can give some description. And each and every description, you can categorize it. You can add categories to your description. For example, likewise, you're getting a huge tree of HTML elements, isn't it? So every time you're going to call the same function to do the same task. Okay, so every time you want to create an input element, you just call this function, that's it. Okay, so then this function or this JavaScript function would essentially become a reusable function. Okay, just keep this in mind. We'll get back to this. We'll apply this and see. But here, this function is just associated with only one task, that is have an input, but create an input button, input text box, create a button. I'm assigning a class name here. So this kind of dynamic way of dealing with HTML is very essential, because your JavaScript is going to handle, is going to do only two things. Number one, understand what your server is saying, whatever your service is, it tries to understand it, and you need to render your HTML accordingly. So that decision making will be done on JavaScript. So obviously, if you're taking a decision using JavaScript, you should be in a position to render as well, because you need to check the conditions, right? So here, create element is one function we came across, and then you're going to assign these class names. Obviously, when you're using some advanced frameworks of JavaScript, you don't tend to use, I mean, you don't need to write this much of code. Actually, even this code would get optimized, but you need to kind of tear down what exactly those default functions do. Okay, and then you're giving some placeholder, and then you're giving this button a name or some text. So this is where the binding happens. Okay, the event binding that I was talking about, this binding happens. Okay, so the default function that we use here is add event listener. The syntax is pretty simple, as we discussed. You're associating a click event to this function. Now, this syntax, I think we kind of stopped at this particular discussion, right? What exactly this function is, and what is the meaning of this. So just to talk about a little concept here. So your JavaScript is basically gone by some, you can say, in simple words, you can say it as a regulatory or some government which is managing or which is taking care of JavaScript and making sure JavaScript is being evolved over time. Okay, so ECMAScript is something, or your ES ECMAScript basically tells you, or it basically writes some set of rules or a constitution for your JavaScript. Okay, so currently the latest versions, if you see, so most of the times we tend to use ES6 and ES5. There are few beta versions and new versions that are available, but as most of the, if you take in the last 10 years, these UI frameworks evolved a lot, and also JavaScript has evolved a lot. So most of the legacy applications that you come across once you get into a job, or once you start working. Most of the times you either see ES6 or ES5. Okay, so one of the biggest task, or one of the biggest thing that you need to understand, even it is very important in your interviews, because this is very basic. When someone wants to test you on, okay, whether this guy is at least revised any book on JavaScript. So these kind of things they'll ask. Okay, so they might ask you what is the difference between ES5 and ES6, or they can talk about any particular change that happened from ES5 to ES6. Okay, I'll give you one example, but I would strongly recommend you to go through any documentation. Actually, there are a lot of pages available out there which talk about all the differences between ES6 and ES5. Okay, so one of the difference here is, as we are currently talking about this syntax here, this syntax. So this is an arrow function. You call it as an arrow function. I'll tell you the reason why this has to be introduced. You know functions, right? You know functions, and also we know how to declare it, how to use them, correct? But what was the need of having an arrow function is this. So in ES6, you normally write a function like this, function X, and then some braces. That's it. As simple as that. If you want to have some what do you call these parameters, you might write X of something. This one not sucks. Wait a second, let me use a whiteboard, or let me just write it here. So yeah, okay, so your function could have some parameters also inside this. Let's say X is having Y and Z as some parameters. Okay, so what ECMAScript changed here is, in 6, you tend to write a function as an arrow function. Arrow, and this is it. This is a function. This is basically an empty function. You may ask, what exactly is an empty function? So if you observe this syntax, understanding this syntax is the most challenging task in JavaScript. This is what differentiates between JavaScript and any other programming language. So this is called a callback. Okay, a callback means what? If what you're saying is, if this action is identified, if a click action is identified, do this. Okay, normally if it is procedural programming, or step by step, what do you do? If click event happens, then what was he doing? Add task to task list. Add task. This is how we normally write in a procedural language, right? But handling this much amount of syntax is not good. You end up increasing the file size of your code, or your code size overall, right? A normal single page application which is highly optimized with React.js or any modern framework, you might end up having some thousands of lines of code. But if you are going to use the same conventional syntax, it hampers the performance of your system. Okay, always the file size that you're going to use, or I mean the file size of your JavaScript that you're going to run on your browser should be as minimal as possible, because browsers are not that powerful, obviously, right? So sometimes you end up opening, or users might end up opening 50 tabs. If you are storing this much of code on browser cache, uh, it's not going to work. So you always need to optimize your code. So coming to this, let us look at the syntaxes, various different syntaxes that we have with our arrow functions. Let me show you a few examples. So just give me one second. I'll show you some example. You guys gone through this arrow functions anytime after our discussion? Okay. I'll just take any reference of a blog and show you. Let me take a common reference for you. Okay. So I'll share you this blog. It is in Geeks for Geeks. I think you can refer to it, not a problem. So these are various different ways of writing arrow functions. You don't need to kind of remember it. That is not necessary, but the problem would be when you come across any code like this, the way that you're looking at this, you might get confused. So you must be aware of the syntaxes, various different ways of writing it. Okay. For example, if you look at here, this is your function name. Okay. The other way of writing this function, look at this. This is the name of the function. The same parenthesis that you used to have here in regular JavaScript, and you have your curly braces. Okay, and this is a function call. And this is your function declaration. Right? Understood? And if this function is getting called, you're going to, execution will go there, just like any other function. All right. So if you go down, if you try to understand more, yeah, passing parameters into it. A function name, the parameters that it got, all these parameters, these are all your parameters. 3 function parameters I have, an implication symbol, and curly braces. This is one way. And there are a few complex ways as well. See, your assignment or your variable assignment or your function parameter assignment can happen on the fly. Just imagine how much amount of code has been reduced using this syntax. Don't worry, you'll get used to it once you start practicing. And there are some complex ways. Let's see if they get. Yeah. Let us look at so this reference you can use. I'm sending this in the chat box. Clear till now? Any questions here? All right. So now what happens is, now what is the purpose of writing it is the question. So just imagine writing a function inside it or declaring a function inside another function that increases the complexity of the code and also size of the code. So that is a major advantage of it. So if someone asks you what is the advantage of your arrow functions, the main reason is it tends to reduce the size of, that is a main function, okay, or the main reason for it. And then you have, see, so you added an input text box and you have your button created. You gave some touch up to it, touch up to these two elements. And what you said was, if a click event happens, then call this function. So essentially, and if you observe something, this is very important. You can look at it like your, what do you call it? A simple function. This is a function, isn't it? This is a function. And this is parameter 1 and parameter 2. So add event listener is taking a function as a parameter inside it. That can happen. Okay. So in JavaScript, functions take functions as parameters. Okay. So whenever you're learning syntaxes, let's say you come across the syntax of your add event listener, they normally say, okay, in the documentation, you normally end up seeing add event listener. and they would say key event comma function, or they sometimes write callback function. Okay, so it can take functions inside. All right, and then after calling this, so now how will your execution work? It goes to your add task to list. Okay, so let's go there. Your add task to list is somewhere here. Where is my function? Let's search for it. See, this is going to get triggered. Add task to list. So your execution will come here. And if you observe, it is taking in a parameter called text. Now, where is this text coming from? You're basically passing an argument, right? So if you observe, you're passing input dot value. So this is one keyword, you can say, or a syntax, which, so what is our input element here? An input text box. So essentially what it is doing is, it is taking an input value, means the value that you entered, okay? And your event listener, you already binded it here. So as soon as the click happens, this function gets called and your input value is going to get passed. Okay. So now I'll show you the same flow by debugging the same code in your developer tools. Okay, this is very important. Debugging JavaScript. I mean, once you get into a developer role, 90% of the time you do the same. I mean, you end up debugging the code. So this is my, okay, let me go step by step, sorry. This is my application or the page that I'm using. Go to inspect, or just you can click F12. There are multiple ways to open this. Just inspect it. Come to sources. Sources is a place where I'll be this is very important, guys. Just please be more cautious. You can ask me to stop anywhere where you might get confused here. So you go to sources where you can basically see the entire file structure or your folder structure that you have. So I have to-do.js, which is my JavaScript. So you can see the entire code. And you have your CSS, it got loaded, and your index.html. Okay. So if you observe, there is a difference. Look at this index.html. I think I have already shown you this, but again, I'm reiterating. This is my index.html, the template that I wrote. This is static HTML. I'll show you the difference between static and dynamic HTML. But if you come to elements, see, elements is a place where you see the runtime. I mean, what is the current situation of my application? If you see here, inside body, you have a lot of elements came in. Where these elements, from where you got these elements, these are dynamically rendered. Okay, your HTML got dynamically rendered using the code that is written inside your to-do.js, the function that we were just talking about. This one. Const input, you created it. You created an input button. See, it got rendered here. Then you created a button. It got rendered here, add task. See, the same, you gave the same name, add task. Okay. Now, I want to see exactly how this is going to function. Okay. How exactly the execution happens and how are you going to debug? Let us say, for example, I did some mistake in the code, or I want to understand the data flow. Understanding data flow on your client side is very important. How you're, I mean, see, there are 3 steps here. One, you're trying to give some information, and then you're basically adding an event or doing some action here, action that I was talking about. So how your data got captured and got rendered here is the question now. Okay, let's go to it. I can repeat this explanation once again, but you can ask me any question in the middle. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll go to sources and I'll identify, let's say this is the activity that I'm doing. Okay. I'm saying by mid, for example. Okay. This is the data input that I gave, but I didn't perform any action yet. So, but from the code, you understood that this is this one. This is the place where your event is going to get captured. Okay, I'm minimizing this. Yeah. Let me annotate this. One second. Yeah. So this is the place where the event is happening, right? So the execution should come here. So what I'll do is, and this is on line number 104. And you need to understand a few buttons here. This is your debug, pause and play, line by line execution. You have this, sorry, this is step-by-step execution. And you can hold or stop your debugging here. This is your hold or stop button. Okay, these three buttons are important. And you have these breakpoints I'll show you, and you can watch for variables. Watching for variables means there are few variables that we declared here, right? If you see input is a variable, button is a variable here, a button, class name, these are all variables. Let's say I want to find out what is the value at the current time. So then I'll just use this watch portion here to identify what exactly is happening inside it. Okay, let's start. So my assumption here is as soon as I click on add, it should come to 104. That is the assumption, right? So now what I'll do is, see, I just clicked on line number, this is clickable. I just clicked on line number 104. This is called a breakpoint. Okay, this terminology is important. This is a breakpoint or your debug point. Now let's see. I entered the information. I clicked on add task. See your debugger started executing. Okay, and see it will show you here paused in debugger. Okay, you have a play button means go to the next step or the next breakpoint. This means the next breakpoint means you can put multiple breakpoints. Okay, 104, 106, 107. If I click on play, it would skip, or for example, I kept my breakpoints and 104 and 107 at 104 and 107. If I click on play, see, it came directly to 107. So it skips few lines for you. That is this play button. But if you click on uh, this inverted, or you can say this curved arrow, it will go to the next function call altogether, wherever this function call is happening. Okay. Now let us understand what is the value of our, what are the values this my variables are carrying. That is very, very important. Okay, understanding variables, because when you tend to debug or when you're trying to fix any bug on your system or on your application, the first thing that you understand is how is my data getting, how is my data being flown from one function to the other function. So I just hover on any variable. If you observe the value of input, or you can even go to your console to make it more clear for you. just type input. It's a variable name. See, what is the input here? It is an HTML. An HTML element with a class name add task input, and it is having a property called autofocus, placeholder as add or search task. Where did all this information came from? It came from your code. That is what you did from here to here. It is getting reflected. Likewise, look at button. Likewise, you can look at various different variables. Let's say you want to watch a particular variable consistently. Your focus is only on one variable. You can add that variable name here. Let's say I'm adding input here. See, it displays the name. Okay, this is the value of your input. Let us say, see, there is one variable that you're passing here. See, as soon as your button gets clicked, what you're saying is carry this input dot value. Let us understand what is there in input dot value. Input dot value is empty. Okay, so why is it empty? Why is it not here? What did I write? Buy milk. It is not buy milk at the moment. The value is not updated yet. Why? Because the reason is your HTML just got rendered. It is not initialized yet. The value is not initialized yet. Okay. So, and moreover, our debug point is somewhere in 107, but you already called a function called add task to the list. Means this execution is already done and it got deleted. It got empty. See, I'll reiterate on this again. I'm getting, see, buy milk got added. See now. I'm again writing, let's say, buy eggs. Open the debugger. Now let us check for the value of input.value. Let's see what is there in input.value. I'm keeping my debugger in 102. Okay. Previously it was at 107. The value was empty. Now I'm clicking on add task. See, it came to this function. See, for this line 104 to be called, it should first of all call the function which is here, right? So the function call happened. And if you look at the input value now, I think you can do it and watch. Input dot value, it is empty. Okay, now let's come to this one. Now I got the input value executed. Let us check input value again. It is empty. Go to the next. See, I'm going to the next function call. I'm clicking on this curved arrow mark. Okay. See, now it started rendering. So it is going to multiple, what do you call, multiple functions. Okay, that is the sequence of it. And if you observe, it ultimately went to something called VM999. So that is your runner, your JavaScript runner. So let's understand it. So now what I want to do is I want to understand the entire flow. I want to see what exactly is happening inside add task to list. Means, see, whenever you're adding a task, it is getting saved somewhere, isn't it? By X, it is getting saved in a list. So where is that happening exactly? Is what I want to understand. So this function is being called. I can search for it here. And here is that function. Add task to list. Okay. I'm repeating the same wheat, for example. See, the text value that I got is by weight. Let me run this again. Yeah. If you observe, there are inside 1.104, you got two more execution points here, if you observe. Here and here. Okay. So whenever you have callback functions or multiple functions written, sometimes you may end up writing six functions in the same line. Even you have those kind of syntaxes as well in JavaScript. So you have these debugger here. So this function add task to list is getting called. Let us see what is the value of this input at this moment. See, now it is by rise. The reason being, previously the debugger was on line number 104. It was a callback function. I was not trying to debug what is happening inside this callback. Okay, or inside this function itself. So currently it is carrying by rise, and the next step should be a function call. So this should go to, so this is a function call, isn't it? This dot add task to list. So let's go to the next step. See, this function got called add tasks, and it sent a parameter called by rise. It is going to check. I'm adding debuggers at all the places. See, so it didn't execute the if part. It came to my else part. Okay, and this is the guys. So now we are going to dig into the data structure. If you observe, here it is, this dot tasks dot push new task. What is this now? So you have what is this dot tasks? Look at the code and tell me what is the data structure of, or what is the data type of this dot tasks? I think we didn't discuss. Okay, leave it. I think I didn't tell you. 1 second. So this dot tasks, we didn't discuss about this class declaration. So we'll come to that. So here, what we are trying to do is, in the first session, we were talking about this local storage. Remember, we were discussing about local storage. So essentially what we are doing is, whenever you enter something, you need to store all this information somewhere, right? So here in this case, normally if it is an application which is running on cloud, you'll have this information saved over in a database, and you retrieve it using an API call or a function call. So, or an HTTP call, not a function call. Sorry. But here in this case, we are storing this information in my local storage. Okay. So clear till now? Till now, any questions? We are switching to another topic. So just to summarize, we talked about how the function is written, what is a callback function, and how you can write arrow functions, and how to debug. Okay, these are your very, very important foundations. All right, and you saw you're actually witnessing how your data is getting passed from one function to the other function. Okay, now talking about the data structure. Now, what is this dot tasks? So for us to understand it, you need to understand the structure of the code here. Let's come back to the structure. If you see, I have two classes written in this code. Line number 1 to 5, I'm kind of minimizing it just to make you understand better. I just have two classes, very simple. Okay, class 1 is task. Again, I told you class is nothing but a programming element which represents a set of people, articles, or whatever. Likewise, you have class called to-do list. if you go to the first class, it is not complex. It's pretty simple. It is just having a constructor. A constructor is a function inside which you kind of declare what are the properties of this class. Okay, what all properties it does possess. And sometimes these constructors can take text as input. Okay, what exactly is this? The purpose of writing text here, will come to that. That is the end of this discussion, or this is what we are trying to address here. Why this text is written, we'll come to that. And you have a predefined value is completed, which is false. Simple class and two properties for it. And as we discussed, class will normally have two parts in it. Classes can have props, which are your properties, and functions. Functions using which functions are nothing but actions, some real-time actions, which these props can be modified, tweaked, or deleted, updated. Okay. So the basically your CRUD operations is what you perform on these props using your functions. So here you have this class again. Now look at this class now. This class is having a constructor. Forget about the variables inside it. It is having a constructor which is talking about the properties of a to-do list. What all properties this to-do list consists of. And as per our requirement, as we initially saw, my to-do list should be able to filter my tasks, search tasks inside it, show all the tasks at once on the initial load. Likewise, you have multiple functions. So what we created is, forget about the right side values that you are seeing here, but just get concerned about tasks, completed tasks to be done, which are incomplete. Likewise, you have multiple. Okay. And then you have a function called render. We'll come to this function, don't worry. A function called render. And you have one more function. This is also a function, add task to list. And then you have one more function, add list with the tasks, add filtering buttons. See, you'll end up having a lot of functions here. Add prompt for adding tasks, search task button, then save task in local storage. See, these many functions you got in a single class. Okay, I'll tell you a real-time example for this, or a real-time application for it. Let us say I want to build a system where we'll come to the same food delivery application example. I have my user. I have my application in which there is a user class or a user type. What all actions you can perform on a user in your entire application? You can associate, or you can map or attach an order information to the user, because user is going to order something, isn't it? You can attach address to a user. Likewise, on a single user class, you can perform some 1,000 different tasks, 1,000 different actions. Means sometimes in highly scalable applications, you may end up having some hundreds of functions under a single class. Okay. Now just imagine writing those hundreds or 1,000 functions in a single file. Would the code be readable? No, it is not readable, and it is tough to maintain. Tough to maintain, I mean, whenever you're creating an application, as we discussed, it might be used for years together, and multiple people are going to come and go into the project, and they'll have very strict timelines, so they can't invest in searching for something, or looking at some code which is very huge, and just to find out a simple problem, it might take a lot of time. So obviously your code should be maintainable. That is one of the major business requirement for any IT firm or any software application. So this is one main problem that your React or Angular addresses. Okay, just keep this in mind. We'll come back to it. This is one problem. The reason why I'm digging deeper into JavaScript is because you need to understand all the problems here. Then you'll realize the essence of using React. Okay, but anyway, you have a constructor and then you have various different functions that are going to get performed on the property. See, take any constructor. For example, look at this one. Take any constructor. So in simple words, I'm checking for text, whether it is empty or null. And then I'm adding something. Basically, this push is a JavaScript function. Essentially, what it does is it creates something and it is going to add something into this tasks. Here, tasks is an array. I'll tell you where this array is declared. Okay, I'll come to that. But essentially, tasks is, if you see, one of the property, isn't it? Means what? This function is again tweaking one of the property in your constructor or of your class. That's what your functions do. Okay. Now, given that we have these many functions, if you are referring to any property that belongs to this particular class, you use the keyword this. Okay. This is a very generic and most annoying notation. Most of the people end up not learning JavaScript because of the word this, because it confuses a lot. But for you, just simply understand, if you are writing this dot tasks means the word tasks is declared inside this class somewhere. It belongs to this particular class. Belonging to a particular class means what? It is one of the attribute or some feature of this particular person or an article or whatever. As I told you, you can define anything with a class of that particular class item, right? So now we will try to understand two things here. One is, if you look at the initial declaration, the initialization of this tasks variable, if you observe, they are using a syntax here. JSON.parse window.localstorage.getItem. Okay, so window represents your web page. This page, this beautiful page that this guy built. I'm stopping this debugger. We'll come back to this. Window talks about this page. Dot local storage means wherever your local information got stored. If you want to have a look at it, go to inspect, application. You can find local storage here. Look at our local storage here. If you observe, all your tasks are being stored here. Okay, one disclaimer here is, this is a very simple example application. So this guy is storing here, but essentially you should always avoid storing or using local storage as much as possible. It is only for specific business requirements, but essentially you should not store anything in your local storage. It is only in case of emergencies and in very special scenarios. Okay. So now, what is he trying to do is the question. What exactly this person is trying to do here in this line number 9. So he's parsing the information. You can see JSON.parse is a default JavaScript function. And the task of this is, it will convert a string into JSON. A string into JSON. Okay. Or, let me open any document. JSON.parse. Try to understand each and every function, you will end up learning nothing. Okay. See, the common use of JSON is to exchange data from a web server. When receiving data from a web server, the data is always a string. This is the most, as I told you, W3 schools is only for looking at the syntax, but not the concept. This is a big blunder. Okay. Are we using any web server here? We are not. We are just using local storage. So the statement itself is wrong. You can use JSON to convert a string. See, this is a string. It may look like an object, but it is enclosed in your quotations, your single quotations or double quotations sometimes. This is a string. To convert your string into what? The data is always string. Parse the data with JSON parse. It becomes a JavaScript object. A string into JavaScript object is the conversion that you're trying to do. Okay. JSON what? So you give a string to it, and it gives you an object. Okay. Now, what exactly is JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It is a standard notation to write an object. Now, what is an object? An object is a class at a particular instance, or if you're talking about a particular thing. Class talks about things in general. Object talks about a thing in particular. That is the difference. Students is a class. Abhishek is an object, in simple words. Okay. So this conversion is very important, and you will come across JSON.parse multiple times. I mean, but though the description that he gave is incorrect, but basically it is a main application. See, what he's saying here is the common uses. I mean, whenever you get information from a web server, whenever you get information from your servers or your backend, it will always be in your string format. That is a format, because serial communication, remember, your communication through wires happen in a serial manner, or there, of course, there are multiple ways of your digital communication, but the most predominantly used format is your serial. Even the information that you get to your from your USB or your mouse or your projector, HDMI cable, whatever, the communication happens in a serial manner. Okay, the information you receive to the ports of your computer would be serial. So to convert that serial information into object, see, object means it is an organized format. Your information should always be organized, and object is one way of putting information in an organized way. Okay, you can call it as an object, you can call it as a key value notation, you can call it as an instance of a class. Sometimes you call it as JSON. Okay, one key takeaway here is learn about JSON, learn about understanding how JSON works, what are the applications, how to write the notation for it and all that. Okay, just go through this. You can go through the official page here. Understood? So essentially, whichever information that you get, it is going to convert into an object format. Okay, that is the function of your JSON parse. Now, if you come here, window.local.storage, just look at the way our information is stored. Local storage always stores your information in string format. That is one more takeaway. This is complete string. Okay. You may ask, I'm looking at it in a very organized way. Why are you saying it is unorganized? It is unorganized. Your Google Chrome is enabling you to look at it in a very, beautiful fashion. Okay, just to make you understand. But if you look at this item, it is a string with an array in it. If you look at this structure, understanding these kind of structures is very important. I'll show you. I'm copying this. I'll put it here and I'll explain. So this is the format I got. Okay. An array with an object number 1. See, look at this. As I told you, I'm talking about a task only, but in this case, it is buy groceries. Number 2, number 3, 4, Likewise, I have multiple objects, and your array always carries similar elements. Array doesn't carry elements which are what do you call it? Which are different. Okay. It is opposite of your unity and diversity. Okay, it just carries similar elements. This is called array of objects, and this format is very, very important because most of the information that travels across your internet will be in this format only. Because you always talk about, see, for example, we were looking at this Zomato, right? Multiple restaurants are being displayed. Okay, let me show you. I'll try to show you. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to figure it out or not. I'm going to Agra's restaurants. Okay, I'll show you how to debug it. Inspect network. We looked at sources before. This is just an example to show you how your information looks like. Okay. Elements is a place where you can see your HTML. Console is a place where you see all the errors. If you want to run some JavaScript, you can run it. And network is a place where you see all the calls that are going out and in. Means obviously your web page is interacting with the external world, right? So every HTTPS call will be logged here. Okay. And then in sources, you tend to see the code. See, these guys are hiding this entire sources. Okay. For security reasons. You can look at the performance application. You can look at the local storage. See, if you look at Zomato, they are storing some information. Last external referrer time. This is a timestamp actually. It might look like a number, but it is a timestamp. Likewise, they'll store some information about you. Session storage. I don't see anything getting stored. But anyway, come to this network log. See, what I want to understand is, what I'm trying to do here is, I got a list of restaurants, isn't it? Every restaurant is an object, and restaurants is a class. In our case, to-do list or task is a class. Each and every particular task, like buying milk, is an object. And the format that we saw is array of objects. And we saw it in a very simple, in a very noob fashion. Okay. But let us see if we can look at the way how this restaurant information is coming from the backend. This is how you debug most of the times, as I was mentioning, most of the time you will end up, spending your life in using the debugger. So let us say you're trying to solve a scenario where, for example, I'm giving you one bug. New Pizza King, for New Pizza King, you're not able to see the image. This French fries image is not displaying. That is error that your QA team has reported or your testing team has reported. Now, what you tend to do is you go to your inspect, you see the network. Now the information is already loaded. Okay. But you want to see how the information is coming. So you need to repeat the task. So I'm clearing the log here. This is your cross button, which clears everything out. And I'm selecting XHR, fetch or XHR. Now, what is fetch? Fetch is a function of JavaScript. It is a default function to make a HTTP call, to call a server, to call a remote server. Fetch is a function that we normally use. You can refer to this documentation. It is a default, sorry. It is a default function of JavaScript, which will help you to fetch an API or fetch some information over internet. Okay, we'll come to this. We have a lot to discuss here. We'll come to that. But That is the reason they mention select, fetch, etc. And rest all you're seeing CSS, images, media, fonts. These are various different calls that happen, from your browser to get all this information. Okay, now I'm recording. I'm trying to reload this page once. Okay, look at how why is this coming? Not sure why the script is being executed. Anyway. It's like there are a lot of errors. Okay, actually, this is a default setting that was there, which was selected as pause on caught exceptions. Okay, if you look at this network log now, see, these are all the calls that got made, that are being made at the moment. Okay, let me minimize this for you. These are various different fetch calls that happened once I reloaded this page, zomato.com/Agra. Okay. Out of these, you might have a call or an HTTP call, which will bring you some information about these restaurants, is what I'm guessing. Let us see where that call is. Okay. So this is how you debug your APIs, as I was telling you. You can select any call, go to the preview or response, anything. Okay. I'm looking at response of each call. Collect, not this, not this, not this. Not sure if they're exposing it. Not seeing anywhere, which is, oh yeah, I can see some information here. Look at this structure. The structure is important for you. I think must be in it. I'm not able to see the restaurant list, but I can see something else. All collectors. Look at this one. Oh, yeah, I can see pizza somewhere. See, I'm getting some information here. I'll try to show this in an understandable format. There are a lot of online tools which will help you to check JSON. This is a very huge information. I'm trying to make it, I'm beautifying it. Look at this. Look at this structure. This is your JSON structure. And the left side ones are your keys and the right side ones are your values. Does they look like objects here? These are all objects. I think somewhere you would see, look at this, pizza, fast food, desserts, and beverages. Let's check if there is any place where you are getting this. It's not yet rendered, but yeah. Okay. So this is the way you receive information from the backend. And moreover, if you look at the format that you're receiving this information is a preview. This entire response will be in a string format, but not an object. It might look like an object, but it is completely a string. Okay. So to do these kind of conversions, you tend to use JSON.parse. Okay. So here, what you're doing is you're trying to get this entire information tasks, array of objects. And so obviously, if you are converting an array of objects into JSON, this dot tasks, the data type of the word or this value tasks will become an array. And dot push is the function that you are using here. Dot push. Push is used. This is the syntax. Array dot push. Sorry. Array dot push. This is the function. So essentially what happens is if you have an array 1 dot comma 2 comma 3, and if you write dot push of 4, this gets added at the end. Okay, that is a function of this. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking every new task and adding it at the end of the list tasks. That is what is happening here as well in your application. Okay, so I think, yeah, we will stop it here. So the key takeaways in today's class are understanding how to debug, and we will be debugging this on a regular basis because debugging is little tough to understand and practice. We'll continue understanding the same code tomorrow as well, and we'll catch up in the next class. Okay. Thanks,
Sure.
and I'll share this recording in the group itself.
Yeah, Revant, we don't have access for that
The previous
Notion.
ones?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll share it with you. Acha, you have provided these emails. Okay. Okay, I'll send it over emails.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.